What life was really like in 17th century Paris. A city of splendor and strain. 17th century Paris trembled between glory and decay. It was a metropolis of contradictions, where the heavens seemed to touch the gutter. To walk these streets was to enter a stone labyrinth, where the stench of the sewers mingled with the heavy scent of ambergris and musk from passing sedan chairs. The narrow streets, dark veins in the city's body, were rivers of mud. The infamous Boue de Paris, a black, sticky paste that clung to the hem of a beggar's rags and the silk stockings of a duke alike. The air itself was thick, a visible haze composed of wood smoke from 100,000 chimneys and the dust of crumbling limestone. Markets roared from dawn until dusk, a cacophony of haggling voices, bleating livestock, and the rhythmic clatter of iron-rimmed cartwheels on uneven cobblestones. Above this chaotic symphony, the church bells tolled relentlessly from Notre Dame to Saint-Germain, serving not just as a call to prayer, but as a warning of unrest, a toll for the plague, or a celebration of royal power. Carriages, lacquered and gilt, clattered past huddled masses with reckless speed, splashing the filth of the street onto the walls of ancient houses that leaned toward each other as if gossiping across the alleyways. The Seine, the city's great churning artery, carried both commerce and corruption in its gray currents. Behind the shuttered windows of the Marais, cardinals in crimson robes schemed the fate of nations, while in the garrets of the Latin Quarter, poets whispered of rebellion, their ink-staining fingers numb from the cold. Paris was brilliant, volatile, and hungry, a city poised on the razor's edge of transformation. On the Île Louviers, the city felt raw and industrial. This was the Paris of sweat and spine. The low, marshy island lay strewn with vast mountains of timber. A chaotic landscape of logs floated down from the distant forests. Its muddy banks were perpetually crowded with barges unloading the grain that fed the city and the firewood that kept the winter at bay. It was a place of shouting foremen and straining backs, a testament to the sheer physical labor required to keep the capital alive. Further north, at the Porte Saint-Denis, the dust of the road met the grandeur of the monarchy. The great arch rose like a titan above the churn of carts and weary travelers. Its bas-reliefs, depicting the victories of the king, looked down sternly upon the daily commotion below. It was a boundary line, a declaration that you were leaving the wild countryside and entering the seat of absolute power. At the Hôtel de Ville, Paris displayed its civic face. The great Renaissance facade rose above the Place de Grève like a monument to order. Yet the square before it was stained with memory. It was here that festivals erupted in fireworks, and here that the executioner's axe fell. Beneath the carved stone, the city's pulse beat hard. Messengers hurried across the cobbles, clutching decrees that could change the price of bread or start a war. From the crowded halls inside, the murmur of disputes drifted out, a low hum of merchants and magistrates pressing their claims. Outside, vendors mingled with agitators, their shouts echoing as the river wind swept the square. Here power felt ceremonial yet fragile, always one riot away from chaos. But it was on the Pont Neuf that Paris truly gathered in all its unruly glory. This was no mere bridge. It was the stage upon which the entire city played its part. Wide, open, and paved in stone, it thrummed with a carnival that never slept. Vendors hawked their wares from trays, jugglers tossed fire into the sky, and charlatans sold bombs to gullible crowds. Thieves moved like shadows through the press of bodies, cutting purses with surgical precision. Horses clattered past, carrying nobles who looked down with disdain and fascination at the mob below. Gossip was the true currency of the Pont Neuf. Pamphlets and rumors changed hands as quickly as gold coins. "The cardinal is ill," one might whisper. "The king has a new mistress," another would reply. Beneath the bridge's arches, ferrymen shouted obscenities, and river smells rose thick and sour, mixing with the aroma of roasting chestnuts. It was the city's great crossroads, loud and watchful, where every breath felt charged with possibility. To stand on the Pont Neuf was to stand in the center of the world. Inland, at the Palais Royal, Paris revealed its mask of intrigue. Behind dignified arcades, the air was perfumed and tense. Courtiers in wigs traded secrets behind fluttering fans. The garden offered a rare hush in the roaring city. Gravel paths crunching under velvet shoes and clipped trees created an illusion of peace. But it was elegance draped over tension. Every smile here hit a dagger, and every alliance was temporary. Across the city, the Luxembourg Palace stood serene, a reflection of Italian nostalgia where Queen Marie de' Medici plotted her returns amidst ordered gardens. At the Place des Victoires, elegance was shaped into certainty. The circular square framed the statue of Louis XIV, rising proud above polished facades. It was stone beaten into submission, a reminder that the chaotic medieval city was yielding to the iron will of the monarchy. And then, there was the shadow of God. Notre Dame towered above the Ile de la Cité, a mountain of Gothic stone. Its gargoyles leered down at the sinners below, and its darkened stone caught the light like a solemn beacon. When its great bells shuddered, the sound vibrated through the marrow of the streets. Inside, the air was cool and thick with incense. Under the vaulted shadows, worshippers murmured their hopes, reminding the city that even kings were judged by a higher power. At the city's western edge, the Tuileries Gardens stretched in ordered rows, offering Parisians a rare sweep of calm. Beyond them stood the Porte de la Conférence, where the city thinned into open ground. But at the Porte Saint-Bernard, the city opened to the river's rougher currents. Barges pressed in with grain and wine, their crews shouting over the rumble of carts. The old gates stood weathered but watchful, marking a threshold where crowded streets met the harder labor of the Seine. Parisians lived densely packed, stacked atop one another. Thousands of families occupied tall, narrow houses that leaned over the streets, blocking out the sun. The city had swelled past 500,000 souls. Artisans, clerks, and merchants moved through a daily press of noise. Privacy was a luxury no one could afford. The city's pulse was felt in every stairwell and through every thin wall where one could hear a neighbor's cough or a lover's quarrel. For the poor, life was a battle. They crowded church steps wrapped in rags against the damp winds. Beggars pleaded for coins, their hands blue with cold, children trailing beside them with hollow eyes. Amid markets overflowing with pheasants and palaces dripping with gold, their presence was a constant, haunting reminder of the hunger woven into the capital. The shadow of the poorhouse was never far away. Winters in the 17th century bit hard. The Seine often froze solid, turning into a jagged plain of white. Yet citizens flocked onto the ice with skates and sleds, turning danger into a bustling winter fair where fires roasted meat and warmed frozen hands. It was cold, bright, and briefly carefree. A moment where nature was tamed into a playground. Inside the warm glow of a shop, a baker worked amid the heat of wood-fired ovens. The air was heavy with the smell of caramelized sugar and butter. Tarts and glazed fruits drew crowds of nobles and laborers alike, offering a brief escape in a city of noise. Nearby in the Galerie du Palais, the air smelled of ink. Booksellers offered fresh pamphlets and forbidden verses. This was the information hub, buzzing with intellectual danger and the rustle of ambition. Men discussed philosophy, or the latest scandalous play. It was Parisian life compressed into a single corridor of ideas. The century was defined by the men who ruled it. In 1628, Louis XIII and Cardinal Richelieu ruled in a tense harmony. Richelieu, the Red Eminence, was the intellect behind the throne. His strategy guided the king through sieges and intrigue. He was a man of iron will, believing the state was superior to the individual. Their alliance held the realm together by force. Then came Cardinal Mazarin, the subtle Italian. He governed with calm intelligence, steering France through the civil wars of the Fronde. He shaped the young Louis XIV, teaching him that power must be absolute. and the boy learned well. Louis XIV, the Sun King, grew up remembering the unrest of Paris and vowed to command the city through grandeur. As king, he reshaped the capital with megalomaniacal ambition. He found a city of wood and left it a city of stone. He cleared old walls to create broad boulevards that allowed the city to breathe. He carved new squares into the city's heart, creating open spaces of symmetry that celebrated his glory. He commissioned triumphal arches to immortalize royal power in Roman style. He founded institutions and filled Paris with architects who carried out his vision of classical elegance. He installed street lanterns, pushing back the night and the crime that thrived in it. Even as Versailles became his courtly son, Paris remained his public stage. It was transformed, ordered, and illuminated by his will. Under Louis XIV, the city took on a new identity. It was no longer just a medieval cluster. It was becoming a capital of Europe. Disciplined, brilliant, and shaped by the king who intended it to reflect his radiance. The royal family gathered around him in a constellation of duty. The Dauphin bore the burden of inheritance, living in his father's shadow. The royal women exerted strategic influence within the court. Together, they formed a disciplined dynasty. By the late 17th century, the transformation was palpable. The Tuileries Gardens had been reshaped by André Le Nôtre into sweeping geometric order. Broad alleys and clipped hedges drew Parisians into a landscape of royal symmetry. Nature itself had been tamed, just as the nobility and the city had been. Paris, once a chaotic medieval tangle, now stood as the beacon of the modern world. It was a city of light and shadow, of starvation and excess, of mud and gold. It was the crucible of the modern era, forging the identity of a nation in the fires of the 17th century. That is the story of Paris, a city that never truly sleeps, but watches, waits, and transforms. Subscribe for more journeys into the past.